Good evening, everyone, and welcome. There's a hello. We've lost. There we go. Alistair's back. Really pleased to welcome everyone back. If you joined us sort of this time last week, we had a great session about how to become a Google coach with Danielle and with Janelle over there in Northern Ireland. And Danielle enjoyed it so much, she's back again this week. But we brought with Alistair and also Ciara, who is a star of stage and screen and has a degree in theatre and really enjoys being in the limelight. So we found out backstage at the start. So this evening's this evening's session is all about using digital tools to check pupils' understanding. So I'm going to disappear off into the background and hand over to you guys. Thanks very much, guys, for being with us. If you've got any questions, please do post them in the chat. And also, please do say hi and share your Twitter handles and things like that so that we can all get to know each other and grow our PLN. So over to you guys.
Well, good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to you all from wherever you're joining us. We can't see the chat at the moment, so I'll just assume that you're all saying hi, and it'd be lovely to think that there's folks from all over the UK, Ireland, and maybe even further. And we're very excited to be able to join you tonight to share some of our learnings and some of our thoughts about how we can use this digital technology to check for understanding. Darren's already introduced the three of us there. It kind of looks like we're posing to be this moody band. So if there's any people out there that want to kind of sign us up, the next big Irish band is just waiting to be signed up there. Anyway, we'll move on. Some ideas from me that are nothing whatsoever to do with music, but are everything to do with setting the context here of why it is that feedback is so important, why checking for understanding is so important. And in particular, I'm going to be sharing some ideas that I developed for not just myself, but the teachers in my school. I teach in Lurgan College in County Armagh and have shared more widely using Google Slides for what I'm calling a digital jotter. But we do want to start very much with a very important question. How do we get the focus right? Sometimes the use of technology can start with what's right in front of us. We can see that and we just use the tool that's there. But I think if we're going to get the most benefit and the maximum benefit out of the technology that we're going to use, we need to start with that fundamental question of why. That's going to bring the focus in for us as we start to move forward. And I want to share a couple of things just for a few minutes before I get into the digital jotter with you about that rationale. In my school, I lead up the teaching and learning, so I try to train the teachers. And we are actually at the moment doing a bit of a cycle on checking for understanding and diagnostic questioning. So some of the things that I've said to my own staff for this is that whenever it comes to learning, it's helpful to understand a little bit of what goes on in that process of learning, that we make sense of new knowledge by integrating it into our existing knowledge. A technical term you can use for that is the knowledge schema. And a couple of analogies that can help for this. So the knowledge schema is, if you like, your wardrobe. It's the thing that you have organized. And some of you might have extremely well-organized wardrobes with sock drawers, with color-coordinated socks in all sorts of places like that. But basically, the more organized the wardrobe, the easier it is going to be to fit in some of that new knowledge. Or a different analogy for you might be musical notes. Any of you from the UK of a certain age might remember Morecambe and Wise Saturday night TV show and the classic clip where Eric Morecambe was playing the piano and Andre Previn was called over to conduct the orchestra, and he was playing the wrong notes, and Andre Previn comes over to him and he says, "You're playing all the wrong notes." And he looks him in the eye and says, "No, I'm playing all the right notes, just not necessarily in the right order." Well, of course, the music sounds best when we are playing the right notes in the right order. And that's the sense of what we're trying to build in terms of the understanding. It's all the right notes in all the right sequence. So it's that connection between the learning that we're doing. And this sense making that we do as we try to form that wardrobe or get the notes in the right order is to a very large degree affected by our prior knowledge. So I have a question for you now. You can type this into the chat. There is no right or wrong answer for this. It's just going to reveal the extent to which your prior knowledge shapes what you interpret here. Which of those two go together? Now, seeing as I can't see the chat, I'm going to have to pick on my two colleagues here. So, Danielle, which of those two would you put together and why?
I would go B and C because they're the same design.
Okay, very good. Ciara, what would you say?
Well, I would have gone, just to be contrary, I'm going to go A and B because they have the same colours.
Okay, very good. Now, there may well be some people out there in the chat who are going, no, it's got to be B and C because Manchester. What? Well, if you bring in the prior knowledge of football jerseys, you will know there's Manchester City and Man United, and A is, of course, Arsenal. Now, there's no right or wrong answer to that, but it illustrates very nicely, I think, the fundamental point that we make sense of new information based partly on what we already know. And that means that we can make different meanings from the same material. You'll remember this, won't you, from a few years ago? What were the colours that you saw in that one? I am definitely a blue and gold person. And maybe you saw, what was it, the black and whatever other one it was.
Black.
The same people looking at the same thing can make different meaning. The same people listening to the same presentation can make different meaning, which is why that process of checking for understanding is so vitally important. And we're talking about in our school this teacher-pupil learning dialogue. The effective instruction is the message delivered, but the other half of that equation is the effective learning. Has the message been received? I love this quotation from Tom Sherrington. He says this: a class is essentially a room full of highly individual, right, we bring a whole bunch of our own prior knowledge to it, easily distracted. In Northern Ireland, we are currently still having wasps in the classroom, right? Anybody who claims that climate change is not a thing, just come in and see the wasps in the classroom in November in Northern Ireland. Distracted. Schema-forming brains grouped in front of us. So it's vital that we can get as much feedback from our students as we can, he says. And that is what we've been focusing on in terms of this feedback loop. Another little analogy, I love my analogies that I've shared with our staff, is a feedback dashboard. A dashboard in a car gives you wide-ranging information. If you've got a class of 28 pupils, that's a lot of individual schema-forming brains for you to monitor, isn't it? You need wide-ranging information, but it also gives you it in a timely manner, right? If you're going from a 60-mile-an-hour zone to a 30-mile-an-hour zone, you need to know from your dashboard if you're down at 30 miles an hour, especially if there's a speed camera waiting there for you. You need that in the timely manner. So that brings me then into the context of us using the digital jotter in our school. A little bit of context: we have a very open bring your own device policy in the school, whether it's laptops, tablets or phones. The policy governs the acceptable use, but we embrace it, and it brings in tremendous potential for us in terms of using this in the classroom setting. So the digital jotter is just a fancy name for Google Slides. At least how we're going to use Google Slides, particularly for this feedback. The setup is very easy. You just go in, set up one single slide, name at the top, your answer, and a little bit of space for my own comment. And then I just copy and paste. And all of a sudden, I have a class set of slides. This, in many ways, actually was the digital version of the mini whiteboards. Huge fan of mini whiteboards in the class, but come COVID and social distancing and us not allowing to share materials and having to wipe down the desks, many whiteboards couldn't be shared anymore. But this is a digital version of many whiteboards, but it's better. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to share with you 3 reasons why I think that the digital jotter really helps in that process of me checking for understanding in the moment, that feedback in a timely manner so that I can see how pupils are getting on. And the first one is for whole class monitoring. This is one example of how I do it. This is a little bit of retrieval practice with my year 11 geographers, looking at some of the processes that go on within rivers. And I can just set this up with little yellow boxes on for them to type in their answers, and I can just check to see how quickly they're picking things up. And I can go on to the slide view like this and monitor the whole class. And it's like I can see them all at once. So instead of me going around looking at their little physical jotters to see how they're getting on, where there's only one of me standing over one of their shoulders, I am everywhere when it's a digital jotter. Mr. Hamill sees all. But I can see everything. I can see everybody and what they're doing at the time. And that allows me to get feedback in the moment. I can give feedback either verbally if I see similar issues being made by a number of people, or I can give feedback individually by just going on and typing. So it's enhancing that feedback loop. But this other aspect then is addressing misconceptions. If meaning making is an individual thing, just because I say something doesn't mean that you're all hearing it in the same way. I need to be able to diagnose and spot misconceptions arising. And wouldn't it be better if I was able to tackle them in the moment before they took root? So how does this help me do it? Rosenstein says this: we cannot simply repeat what we hear word for word. Rather, we connect our understanding of new information to our existing schema, and we construct a mental summary. It's the gist. And the gist, he says, when left on our own, many students make errors of constructing the mental summary, and then he kind of corrects himself. These are not so much errors as an attempt by students to be logical in an area where their background knowledge schema is weak. They're making meaning, but they're making meaning depending on their own prior knowledge, which isn't necessarily the meaning that we want them to make. So how can the digital jotter help with that? Well, here's an example from a PGC student, Zoe White, who was in my class last year. What a year to train to be a teacher. So her first lessons, and amongst her first lessons, she was having to teach remotely because we went into lockdown. And I was talking to her about this digital jotter idea, and she was very taken by it. So we were taking a look here at how we can test and check for understanding with our pupils in some of the erosion processes. So this was her idea. Annotate the photograph using key terminology to see what you can see there. So digital jotter was set up. Each student had a slide, and Zoe was monitoring the students as they were working. So we came to Lucy's slide, and my goodness, look at how much Lucy was able to remember. This is from recall. So there's a lot in there. But one of the things that I noticed and pointed out to Zoe, I said, look, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding coming up here. The hydraulic pressure. For hydraulic pressure to occur, you need to have cracks for the water to go into, but you need to have water going into the cracks, and it's the compression of the water that puts the pressure on the rock either side. So what Lucy had spotted was some of the cracks in the rock. Yeah, sure, no problem. But is the water likely to get up there very often? No. So actually, it would have been better for her to put her hydraulic pressure down here. We noticed that a number of students were saying the same thing. They had half got and grasped the point that we wanted to make, but they had missed something important. You need two ingredients, the cracks and the water. So what Zoe was able to do was to give whole class feedback in the moment to the students, bring them onto this slide and ask the question, is that arrow pointing to the best place? What are the ingredients that are needed for that? What ingredient is missing here? And in the moment, that feedback nipped in the bud any of that misunderstanding that was potentially emerging. And the final one that I'll be looking at with you is the modeling of effective answers. One of the comments that I got whenever I started using this was, sure, people can copy from each other. The students can see each other's slides. Well, the first instance, I say, well, as you know, in slide view, your little icon will appear in the slide that you're on. And if you go onto slide view and you can see exactly where the students are, it doesn't take you saying too many times, Josh, would you get back onto your own slide there, please, for the pupils to realize, he sees whenever I'm heavily sneaky peeky. But in many ways, actually, this adds value. And again, it's how this digital jotter adds value to that feedback loop in the moment. Because what I can do now is to get the students to go on here and have a wee look at each other's answers. So they're working on these answers, and I'll say to them, right, go ahead and find what you think is the best answer here. Peer assessment. But peer assessment on the scale of the whole class, that the students can go through and look at a whole variety of different answers. And we'll give them maybe 2 or 3 minutes to do this. This is extended writing. And then we'll say, right, it's time to go and choose your favorite. And how do they vote? They just simply go and view the slide that they think is the best answer, and their little icon appears on it. And I can see very, very easily which ones are the popular ones. And then I can follow up and say, right, Jessica, you're on slide number 6. Tell me a couple of things that you liked about that answer. And you can have a really good dialogue with that. And then what it allows me to do then, once they've found the best one, is for me to make explicit why that is a good answer. So here's an example of one of the things that I did, and we went through and discussed and annotated and pulled this all apart. A little bit of peer assessment, a little bit of feedback from me, and then, right, go back onto your own slides in light of what you have done. Let's see if you can improve. And again, I can monitor live. I can see them do those things. So what value do the digital daughters add to the feedback loop? Well, they allow me to do that whole class monitoring. I can see everybody at the same time. I can spot those misconceptions as they emerge in the moment. And I can really lean into the collaborative nature of what the digital daughter allows. Now, I would say that all of those functions, and there's more that I could share, but all of those functions are adding value. But when I start with a clear intention of why, bringing the focus that I want to monitor in real time to make sure that pupils are getting what I want them to get, then it means I can design the technology use to make it as effective and as efficient as possible. Ciara.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should just say in the sorry to cut you off after introducing you there. And we'll share this presentation with you. Some of the resources I've shared with my own staff are available there for you to check if you want to. Sorry, here, definitely you this time.
Thank you. No, I am Ciara Hunter, and I'm a teacher at Fort Hill Integrated. And I'm just going to take you through some of the practical classroom digital checks that I've been able to use, the digital tools for checking that I've been able to use within the classroom. My school doesn't have a BYOD, so we are very much sort of working with the interactive whiteboard and working within Google Classroom. I will still set all of my work within Google Classroom so that if there's any issues at all with somebody being off sick or isolating, they can access everything at home. And one of the main things I use, like Alistair, is Google Slides or Google Jamboard. But I find that an awful lot of the students got a great deal of work out of it, but every so often I wanted to try something a little bit different, something that wasn't really in the norm. So I started using Google Forms for quizzes. And what I really enjoyed was being able to use them for escape rooms. I'm just gonna, there's a wee bit of a delay, but I have, I started creating these escape rooms, and it was setting up like a normal, straightforward form. But what I would do then I would set restrictions in the data validation, and the only way they could move forward to the next question was by getting the previous question right. And it meant then there's both sides of it. I remember actually it was Alistair last year had put up, I don't know if you remember this, you had done a Google form and allowed them to go back and redo it. And you could actually see with some students where they were improving and they were getting more knowledge out of being able to do it more often. And I've done some like that, and I've done some like this, and I found that the escape room element, like you said, they get really competitive and they get frustrated if they can't get it right. And I found that it actually was helping with students to go back to their own learning, go back to their own notes, and try and work out what it was they weren't remembering right. And then I actually picked up, now this is from Impact Wheels, and I find they share an awful lot of good ideas. And they had put up one of their short infographics on how to write good multiple choice questions, especially for retrieval practice. Now, I have deliberately done this because an awful lot of the examples I find you see are sort of, no offense, STEM related. So, it's all sort of geography, science, technology. Look at my 3D printing. And I found sort of English was getting left behind a little bit when it came to the digital revolution. So I quite enjoyed trying to do different ways of assessing English, assessing their understanding of what we've done. And so I've always deliberately put in distractors, but made them not obvious distractors. It's one of the issues sometimes when you use pre-made quizzes is it'll be really, really obvious which ones are not the correct answers. So it takes a little bit longer when you're setting it up because you have to really think about, what are my distractors going to be? Something that means that they are really having to make them think and understand their own learning rather than just going, oh, I see like or as. That's my simile. So I deliberately try to put in ones that they have to think and they have to work out. And maybe it's, not quite so obvious. And then the other one was I found that we had an awful lot of multiple choice questions when it came to forms and escape rooms, and I wanted something a little bit different. So I actually used slides and used it almost as a graphics area, and then just downloaded it as a JPEG and put it into my Google form. And I would actually give them. So this example coming up is a stanza from Dulce Decorum S. And instead of giving them 4 options and saying, okay, which one it is, I've actually just labeled different areas within the poem and made them have to actually apply their knowledge in a different way and try to find what's being asked for. And it helps an awful lot of students who perhaps do process differently. And we know that there are, different levels of cognition and different methods, and it allows them to rewire certain thought processes. It becomes a little bit repetitive for some students where they know what, well, that one's obvious, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. When they're presented with a picture like this and they have to actually read through, remember, okay, so what is enjambment? And then try to find the actual example. And again, even when I'm doing this, I try to throw in distractors. I deliberately choose one point in the poem that is maybe dubious for them and they have to think about it. And it just means that, again, it's less of a rote activity and it's more that they're actually having to apply their knowledge. Then we have, so this is my English version of a digital jotter, but it's using it in maybe a slightly different way. So what I've done is I've created a storyboard just by going into slide and edit theme. I have set up, this is the background, nobody can adjust it, nobody can touch it, and they have their first worked example of the first stage in the storyboard. And then they can each go in and you can either do it as a whole class activity, or you can use it within Google Classroom and set it as an assignment. And for myself, I find an awful lot of it with slides I'm setting as an assignment because they're not with their own devices. Or if I'm taking them into a room with, into one of the computer rooms, then I can set it as a whole class and it works well. And it means that they can, try and work sort of the brain book buddy, because they're all in a room together. And if they need to work with each other and develop those working, learning relationships, they can do that. And it just means that because it's set up in a certain way, there's only certain actions they can take. And it works quite well. And storyboarding works well because they have to show their knowledge, but it's not big, huge amounts of extended writing. They're just summarizing and organizing the information that they can recall. And again, even the forms or these work for retrieval practice, just depending on where and when you set it up, it can work quite well. Just even as you'll see when you go into the slide view and you can see everything, it sets it up quite well if you're just wanting to do a short retrieval practice session at the very start of a lesson, before you actually move on to further learning. I saw Danielle saying in in the chat about converting somebody to Jamboard. I would convert every single person I meet, as you're about to see, because the rest of my examples are pretty much all Jamboard based. We have started doing magenta principles. We've started rolling that out, and I mean, it doesn't really matter if it's magenta or blooms or whatever pedagogical aspect you are working from. Jamboard has a way of working with you, and Jamboard works very well with slides. I generally speaking now, unless I'm using, and I use Jamboard as my interactive whiteboard, so I have a copy of every class note that has been taken, to allow again for our own retrieval practice, or just to go back as a class, right? Let's review, and we can go back and see it because it's all saved in the classroom in Jamboard in the classwork stream. But if you're using something like magenta principles where you're using diamond 9, so these are just two different formations of the diamond 9. I created those on slides and saved them as an image, and then in Jamboard set them as the background. So nothing can be changed there. And again, you have the option of either setting it as an assignment in Google Classroom, or you can duplicate the frame, up to 20 slides at the minute. You can duplicate up to 20 frames. And again, see the icons, see who's working on what, make sure they're working on their own frame. And you can see what they're doing and give them that live feedback, as if you were doing your normal elbow work that we can't do at the minute. But magenta principles and diamond 9 in general works really well because it requires pupils to organize, collate, and rank their knowledge. And it's similar to the idea of formative flowers, where you'll have the topic in the center, and then each petal is an aspect of related information that the pupil can remember or can apply and knows how to apply. And again, doing that in Jamboard is easily done. You have your background set up. The students can either type in their own little aspects to put into the petals, or if you're doing something like this where you're organizing and ranking, you can have your 9 elements, your 9 sentences, your 9 paragraphs. Okay, I want you to rank these from most confident to least confident. What areas of this topic are you confident with in being able to use? And again, the next version of that would be very similar to this. It's used in target sorting. So you could have the students sort of go from most complicated to least complicated, or vice versa. And it's just reframing their way of thinking, their way of learning, their way of retrieving information. Because it's, I mean, I'm a big believer in retrieval practice. And the more that we do this and the many different ways that we do it allows them the opportunity to refresh their learning, to refresh their understanding, because the understanding is inherent in the learning. And Jamboard will allow itself to be applied. There are so many different backgrounds that you can either create yourself or are built in. So there's even the squared paper option for the maths teachers. And it does apply itself in so many different ways. And it works well whether they're at home or they're in school. And it doesn't really matter, if they're on a computer or on a tablet. It's applicable in quite most devices. then the other option I have, and it actually shows you, so this was something that I did during one of the lockdowns for a bit of fun for students, and it was basically the different parts of a number of 5 different limericks. And again, the background can't be adjusted, but the student would put their name in. If we were doing it in class and we were duplicating, they would put their name in, or it could be assigned as a homework. And then all of these different elements have been added in as images, and they just click and drag. And it means that they can actually work out and go, no, that doesn't sound right. That line needs to move. And there's none of this sort of frantically rubbing out or putting lines through and leaving coal mines in their books. It's all just, oh, that's not right. And they can just move, and there's less emphasis on making mistakes because it's not causing a panic. It's not causing all of these repercussions. It's simply a case of, okay, that's wrong. What do I do to fix it? And it's just little subtle things that, I dread to say that, almost like microaggressions without even realizing it. This aspect of, oh, right, we need to rub this out, or, oh, I need to change this. I need to now fix this whole page. And that grinds on students without even realizing it. And in an awful lot of aspects, they're doing it to themselves, and giving them this opportunity to realize, oh, it's okay to make a mistake. It's actually normal. It's expected. I need to know where I've gone wrong in order to be able to fix it. And the digital aspect of that, because there are so fewer repercussions. I mean, even if you manage to delete your entire Google Drive, you have 30 days to get it out of the recycle bin. Nothing is terribly permanent. And it just relieves that aspect of things for students, I find. It gives them the opportunity to self-assess their own work in progress, because they can see themselves, something's not going quite right, something needs changed. And it just gives that creative, freer aspect to learning, I find, rather than working on pen and paper. As terrible as that sounds as an English teacher. And then the next wee slide is just an example of what Jamboard looks like when you're using the view. It's not quite as pretty as slide view, I have to admit, but it does work at the same aspect. You simply scroll across and you'll be able to see, and there'll be icons depending on which student is in which frame. And if you find more than one student in more than one frame, there's an issue. Yeah, it's a great tool, and I find it's very, very flexible, and just the actual aspect of if you said, Alistair, the making of it, the process, the drafting, the redrafting, that idea that we redraft and we edit no matter what we're working in. I mean, even now in our adult lives, we draft, we redraft, we edit. Yet for some reason in the classroom, students feel like as soon as they make a mistake, that's it. It's the end of the world. And it helps sort of get them out of that mindset and that framing of, we're not allowed to make mistakes. Because if you don't make a mistake, how are you going to learn from it? But hopefully I've managed to convert a couple of you to Jamboard at least. But next up then is the lady who's brought us here, the lady to blame for all of this, Danielle.
God, Ciara, that was so good. Thank you. And listen, see, when I'm chatting here, just jump in if you want to add anything or build on anything I say. Everybody okay? So just chat away as I talk through a few more ideas. But you have already said so many quality thoughts and processes what can build into the classroom. So I absolutely agree with everything you said there, Ciara. I mean, it's Jamboard and the collaborative aspect of it is just so worthwhile in the classroom. And like Alistair, I think like you could just have slides and Jamboard, and you could nearly do as much as you really need to do in the classroom just by using those couple of tools and using them just really well and really effectively. You know, I think it is that idea of it's just using something and then thinking about all the different ways that you can use it rather than maybe running to the next big thing or the next thing. What do you reckon, Alistair?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, to me, I can go down many rabbit holes when it comes to technology and love finding out all the intricacies of what it can do. But in many ways, the best ideas are the simple ideas. Because the simple ideas are transferable. Everybody can use them, including the teachers. So it's not about necessarily fancy technology as it is about how we're using it to the best effect. And yeah, I became a great fan of Jamboard during lockdown for retrieval practice. And I found, Ciara, just like you did, was able to set up the backgrounds and get them to do it once. And then say 2 or 3 lessons time, 2 or 3 days time, bring them back on again, say, right, from memory, let's see if you can redo this, you know, to consolidate their memory and help them to pull it all together. There's one other thing that I was thinking whenever you were sharing there. I'm trying to remember the name of the quiz show where one of the rounds was they had to go and press a number of buttons to get a whole bunch of answers right. And then they went back and pressed a button and told them how many were right and how many were wrong. And then they had to run back again and change them. And the idea was to get all 10 right. But the only feedback that they got back was you've got 6 right and 4 wrong. And I found actually with Jamboard and that kind of thing, if it's a sorting exercise, that's brilliant feedback to give them because it's a feedback that makes them think rather than, yes, those are right. And those other ones aren't quite right yet. Yeah, that's helpful. Maybe some students need it. But see that one, especially leaning into the competitive side of things, right? Okay, what are the 4 we haven't got right yet? No, we'll change these around. Mr. Hamill, how am I doing? Oh, 8 right, but 2 still wrong. Have another wee go. And, but it's the simple nature of Jamboard that really allows you to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I find, especially for sort of Key Stage 3, you know, some of the students coming in Year 8 especially, you know, they're used to Seesaw and some other applications. And to suddenly have a whole new learning platform in front of them can be quite daunting. But Jamboard it's so intuitive that they can take to it really quickly, and they're not so busy worrying about what to click and where to click it that they can actually just get into the activity and enjoy it. I saw a great example, and I haven't done it yet, so that's why I haven't included it in here. So I can't give it my green tick. But it's something I'm going to try, is using Jamboard for traffic light self-assessment. So you have your red, amber, and green containers on the Jamboard, and then they can
assign... my ideas. I'm coming from next.
Oh, that's what I get for not looking.
Great minds.
Yours with me.
Go ahead. Sorry, Ciara, for cutting across. Go ahead.
No, I'm affronted now. I just love the idea that they could assign themselves, and only you and they see, you know, what their own self-assessment is. And they can actually assign, this is what I'm confident in, this is what I'm not so confident in. And it just gives them that opportunity to reflect on their own learning without there being massive consequences to it.
Yeah. But no, I agree, Ciara. I love a good traffic light myself as well. You know, they are so useful, aren't they? And I mean, just for that communication, and no, I completely agree with you, Ciara. And Alistair, do you want to advance on there for me? Poor Alistair's given the job of remote controller tonight.
Beforehand, I'm the guy behind the scenes. Whenever somebody says next, please, I'm the person that presses the button.
Yeah. So yeah, Ciara, so you're talking about, you know, the idea of the traffic lights, and see down at the very bottom corner of this wee Jamboard screen there. So when they're working away at things, I sometimes ask them to put on, you know, the colour just down the bottom right corner. And when they're doing, you know, that independent practice, it means that I know whether they want me to come and jump in and add extra supports or not. And as you said, just that wee visual is just so useful, isn't it?
It's great, and it's actually really quite subtle. So they don't feel like they're having to throw their hand up and say, yeah. You know, it's just because it's just a little box. It's enough for you to see, but it's really, really subtle for them. That's great.
Yeah, and it's your idea was more developed than mine, Ciara. I'm only winding you up. So the other thing, do you remember we were just talking there about the idea that in Jamboard you can just be messy with your learning. You can just brainstorm and fire down all your ideas, and that's really what we do here with it. So I've just put in a wee example that we were doing in class this week, and this is they were learning about programming. They were learning how to set up an array. So this was me just doing the check for understanding in the class. So we do the whole the prim approach. I don't know, anybody that's computing would know what that is, and we also look at the I do, we do, you do, gradual release of responsibility, and within that, so basically this was me then moving towards them working independently. So I wanted to check, did they understand what all these bits of code were after I had demoed it on the board and talked through it. So this was them working, and just like Alistair was saying in the slides, I was able to at a glance quickly traverse through all of the slides and see how everybody was doing. So you're able to see if somebody's not working on anything, what's going on. You're able to ask them, right, go and have a look, say, at somebody else's slide to see what they've put in. Do you agree with what they've put on there? Why? And is there anything else you could build on for what they've said, and so on. So just it's really useful, and in the class, just having that basically on their mobile phone or on their tablet or whatever device they're using, it's just so easy to use. Now that example I've got up there is on the laptop version. I think somebody put into the chat there the fact that you can have different tools in the app version of Jamboard compared to the desktop version, and I think there's actually more tools in the desktop version. I found maybe. What do you think? Is it desktop or app version? Which do you think has more functionality? So somebody will put in the chat and let us know. So the Jamboard is definitely a big keeper for me in the classroom, because it allows me to see at a glance how everybody's doing whenever they're working. And again, you don't even need to go down to everybody. There's this idea of the equal engagement. Everybody has to be working, and everybody's work is being monitored, and everybody has to participate. So in school here, for example, we're working at the minute on building in, those blended learning routines into the face-to-face classroom to make sure we don't lose all of those gains that we made in the skill development. So what we would be doing here is making sure then that that these are used where they can. Okay, and what I've put into that as well was just a wee link to a video. Jamboard doesn't allow you to integrate video into it, but in the wee post-it note to the side there, so basically I asked the student to go down through and explain to me what they were thinking there. So they were able to do a wee screen record using Loom, and then put the link to their Loom recording in there, so then I could hear why they thought that. And I was able to look at that then after class. So I suppose there's two aspects. There's what you do during class time, and then there's what you do kind of asynchronously after class as well. Yeah. Thanks, Alistair. So another wee tool that I definitely am keeping going forward, another tool that the students really like, is this idea of them designing their own quiz questions. So like Ciara, I loved all of that, what you were talking about with the designing the multiple choice questions, and I definitely want that resource that you talked about from the Impact Wales, because there's so much value in them being able to think of the questions themselves for these quizzes. And sometimes teachers might say, oh, I don't have time to make all of these quizzes. Are you looking to make a quiz all the time for all these different things? But getting the children to actually make the questions themselves is really useful. And the fact that the Google tools have that collaborative feature where they can all work together in the same sheet to build the questions together is so helpful, because then you can, there we go, crowdsource indeed. So you're able to then reduce the workload for everybody, but also you're able to check, do they understand? Because say, for example, I know in digital technology and in programming, we're looking for keywords, things here. We're looking to make sure that they've got the right technical language used. So you'll be able to then go and have a look at how they're framing their different parts of their question and their answers to make sure they've got all of that in. So in the top part there is the Google Docs. So we would just basically use it, a shared Google Doc, and everybody can contribute to it. And I would say divide up the parts that we have learned and ask everybody to take a different section and to build it in. And then, of course, there's all of that discussion that comes after, you know, where you say, ask other groups to go and look at what the other group has done. Is there anything more they can add, or do they agree? And, you know, it's all of the question and that comes all in and around these activities. And then Kahoot is so handy in that it has online a spreadsheet template that you can download and put into your sheets, and then again make that sheets collaborative, and then you can just import that straight away to make a Kahoot. So basically it's so beneficial getting the kids to design their own questions here, because then you can use all of those questions they've made in all of those quiz platforms that they love for that wee bit of engagement, you know, during a lesson, at the start of a new lesson, to check, do they remember, do they understand, to check at the end. So some of my favorites then are Google Forms. So you can even get the kids to make their own Google Forms, and they've designed the questions, and then they're ready to build. Quizlet will allow you just to import all of the questions that they've made together, Kahoot. But then Blooket, I know these are not Google, but I've come across Blooket and we're all hooked. I don't know, have any of you come across it yet? Ciara, have you done it yet? No. What about you, Alistair? Oh my goodness, it is.
Do tell. I'm all ears.
Oh, listen, you have to experience it. It's very like Kahoot. Only, do you know the way in a Kahoot quiz, sometimes there's always the same people that win because they kind of have the information right at the top of their minds, and they're straight in with the answer, clicking the answer and getting to the top of the leaderboard. And look at it's just dog eat dog. Anybody can win. They go in and they can, there's little the one that we like is the gold chest one, and they can steal coins from each other. They can swap scores from each other. It gets really rowdy, really competitive. But interspersed between all of that is questions, just very like your Kahoot quizzes that you would ordinarily have. So because we've probably done Kahoot to death almost, you know, it's been so much Kahoot, it's just nice to have something else to kind of freshen it up, but still get the same benefits from it. So
I have to admit that, Danielle, the Monica in me, the competitiveness is appealing to the Monica in me of having a go at this.
Yeah.
God help the students.
Definitely.
I'm going to be gold chests.
You should definitely give it a go tomorrow with your class. Very, very similar to Kahoot. You'll pick it up in no time, and just maybe go for the gold chest game firstly. Okay. Thanks, Alistair. And I think this is my last wee one, isn't it, Alistair? I've got this one, just one more. So just again, I know it's not Google, but just the other thing that I'm looking at the minute, I'm not too far along the road with it. I've been looking at some of the videos on Global GEG, and that's Desmos. But Desmos, I suppose, is mostly used by maths teachers. But within it, what I learned on one of the global videos is that you can do a custom activity builder. And within it, what you can do is embed like little question checks. So, for example, do you know the way in Northern Ireland here, we can't get PERDAC? We can't get that, you know, into our slides. Well, this sort of might be a bit of an alternative to it. And within it, what you can do is you can create mini questions, and then as you go along, you can check what the pupils have entered in. So it's basically like pause points and then checking to see where they are. And the good thing about these questions is that you can then show for the whole class to see it, and then again it's discussion prompts, and you can show, for example, in this style of question I've gone for, you can show like the 3 questions or the 3 answers, and then you could get everybody to evaluate, you know, the answers and to see which is the best and why. And then on the next slide, Alistair, you can see, I suppose, just the different styles of questions you can build up on it. It's a wee bit like Nearpod, I think, as well, in that the teacher can advance you through, or you can do it self-paced. So there's different styles of questions, and the way sometimes people would say, like, Google Forms is maybe a wee bit limited, whereas with this, it can give you more styles of questions. You can do like fill in the blanks, you can do reordering, and there's lots of good tools in there. So that's what I'm currently investigating and working on. So maybe come back for more and catch up with you all to see if you've given it a go, and maybe we could pool together our ideas. So thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. Excellent as ever. I'm going to come back a slide here because there's something that struck me whenever you were sharing this. As I mentioned earlier, we're talking a lot with our staff at the moment about questioning and to check for understanding. But the questioning can be done through a variety of tools. It could be just the traditional questioning and answer you do in the classroom, but also these digital tools. But one of the things that's really struck me in perhaps a new way over the last number of months as we've been preparing this training for the staff is that we should be actually much more curious than are the pupils getting it right or wrong. Because I've become a lot more tuned, I think, to students getting the right answer for the wrong reason. And I've been using a lot of these checkpoints, as you're saying, just to see, you know, pivot questions and closed questions. I mean, closed questions can sometimes get a bad rap whenever it comes to questioning technique. But in actual fact, they're a very, very good way of just doing immediate diagnosis. The problem is if you only use a closed question, right? Who thinks the answer is A? Who thinks the answer is B? Whatever tool you want to use to get the information back from them. Great, 90% of you right. Got that right. The answer was A. Most of you right there. That's brilliant. But how many of them either have guessed it, but actually more likely to have reasons to A, but the reasoning is flawed? Kind of similar to what I shared earlier on about the hydraulic action taking place too high. There was reasoning behind that, but the reasoning was flawed. So it's what you're seeing there is the marks there and explain your thinking. So what I've been encouraging our staff to do is it's how did you get there question, right? So you've got the answer, right? Brilliant, you're the right answer, and you take a little bit of the pressure off them at that point because it's all the high stakes, you know. In some ways the pressure can be good if it's all about competition, but at the same time that spotlight of attention, oh no, I'm getting asked, well, I think the answer is A. Yes, brilliant. Whew, takes that pressure off. No, can you tell me why
it's like
it's A?
I remember when I was doing my PGCE, being given a bog standard comprehension, and actually what was in the passage was practically nonsensical, but the vast majority of us were able to answer the questions purely because we had done so many activities at this point of this style when we went through school, when it was still mostly chalk and talk, that I knew the first question was most likely going to relate to somewhere within the first few lines. I found the name of the person in the question, the name of the person in it, but we didn't understand. We were able to get it right because we followed the formula of what we do. But it was a nonsensical text, so we didn't actually understand anything. But technically, we would have got full marks. And it's that same idea. It's great teaching them the process, but if they don't actually understand it, it's not going to do them any good later on.
Sure, and yes, it's then also how do we know as a teacher, and that's where that diagnosis I think is so important. Where all of these tools allow for that, because everything that I think is in common from what was shared here is the ability for us as teachers to interact in an enhanced way with our students in a way that would not be possible in the same way if we didn't have the technology.
Absolutely. Can I just jump in and say thanks ever so much, guys, because we've gone through sort of 45 minutes there, but some fantastic resources and ideas shared. And I think what's really stood out for me is that none of them, I think, as you said earlier on, Alistair, none of them are particularly complicated. They're all very simple, very quick to put together, very quick to modify for a different class or a different year group or a different subject. And actually really, really useful kind of just the thought prompts, really, in terms of how you're getting that information from the students and how you're finding out what level of understanding you've got and what misconceptions there are going on. I love the slides with the storyboard approach. It's really, really great to do. But for me, that the little post-it note in the corner of a Jamboard, absolutely superb, because so easy to do. Anyone can do it. You literally just have to be able to click a button, and it doesn't matter how lost you get, everyone can do that. But I think, as you said at the time, Danielle, it's not obvious. It is subtle. They're not putting their hand up in front of the rest of the class and saying, I really don't get this. It's just a nice little, for want of a better word, the old kind of like red and green on the desk to show whether you feel like you're understanding, but again, in a less public sort of environment. So I think really, really brilliant. I love this. Is definitely going out to my school tomorrow with ideas, because I think there's so many things you can do with some of the things, and some brilliant resources. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren.
Yeah, absolute pleasure, Darren. Thanks.
I managed to not break YouTube. I'm quite pleased with that, Darren.
Can I just draw attention to Karen's comment as well?
Yeah.
I think to be fair to Karen, like autocorrect was playing a part there. But if that doesn't work, then apparently bloodletting is another way.
Leeches. We definitely need more leeches in education.
Definitely. They're an untapped resource. So if anybody's got any questions, please do post them in the chat just before we finish up, because it's been really great. I've got a question for you, actually, for all three of you. Bearing in mind, we've talked about various different Google tools and a couple of extras as well. Have you come across anything that you've wanted to do that you haven't been able to create digitally?
Well, I would say, I mean, if this is an extra functionality for Google, yes, more than 20 frames on Jamboard, please, because I have 20 pupils in my Year 12 class. But what I find, the more serious answer, I suppose, would be that whenever I'm planning these things, there is an interesting organic process goes on between my know why, the intentionality they have, and then the know what. It's what the technology can do. And it's actually the dialogue between those. It's very often the functionality of the technology that inspires some of the pedagogical ideas. That's technical loophole. So I don't necessarily come to the technology saying, I wish it could do this, as much as I come to the technology and go, oh, it can do this. All right. So if I use it in this way, then it allows me to do my pedagogical intent anyway. Now, it's not to say that, we wouldn't all have a wish list, but I suppose it's coming at it, dialoguing like that and say, well, what does this particular tool, what's its USP? What does it uniquely allow for that is going to give me something in addition that I can do? And that's always, whatever the technology, however complicated. I mean, it would be great to do something maybe in Google Earth and how we're using that in the geography world at some stage, Darren, because you can go massively deep in that. And so sometimes you can go really deep in terms of the functionality. But very often it's just those little things and saying, right, yeah, I think there's something there that can enhance my practice.
And exactly. And that's us walking the walk and talking the talk, in that we're encouraging students to show what they've learned, show their knowledge, demonstrate their knowledge by applying it in unfamiliar situations. And that's us doing exactly the same thing. How could you apply what this tool will allow you to do in a different circumstance or in a different way for different subjects, different topics, and so on. So Absolutely, really key. Anything from you, Ciara or Danielle?
Well, if we're doing a wish list, I'd like to be able to insert videos in Jamboards. At some point, that would be amazing. But I actually would. I find myself going to the computer and knowing sort of what I want in my head, what I want the activity to be. I've gone through the aspect, what they're going to learn, the process of the thought process they're going to go through. And then I kind of go in and say, can I do this? And half the time I'm finding out things that I can do within Jamboard and within slides purely because I have a need that needs to be met. And I didn't even know I could do it until I tried to reach this final goal and manage to find through these steps, oh, actually this does this and I can do this too. And it's great in that respect. And that's the thing I like, because I know I said it earlier, but it is so intuitive. Even within slides, I sort of, even if I don't know exactly what I'm looking for, I've got a fair idea it's going to be in that part of the menu, or it's, if it's there at all, that's where it's most likely to be. And I've learned more in the last year and a half just looking to see, can I do this, than actually trying to sit down and learn how to do something on it.
It's that exploration, isn't it? And playing. And that's something, admittedly, but that's something that admittedly not everybody's got the time to do. Some people have got more time than others. Some people have got more inclination than others because they've got less distractions than others, and that's just that's life. But one of the big game changers for me in the last 3 months is and I can't remember who it was, so apologies to that person who showed it to me, but using Google Sheets for group work. So essentially just using a spreadsheet and giving every student a row, and in cell B1 the first student puts their answer to the question, and in C1 the second person puts their answer to the question, but then in the next column, in the next column over, or the next row over, however you want to do it, actually that's where the peer assessment goes in. And then in the next column, that's where the improved answer goes in. And you've got the full journey, but you're just using a spreadsheet. And rather than having, say, for example, 30 Google Docs to check, you've got one spreadsheet with 30 people's answers on it. And you can even break it down and then say, right, we're going to do a past paper kind of thing. There's question 1 on tab 1. There's question 2 on tab 2, and so on. And you can work it through like that. And it's just, it's a spreadsheet. And I would never have thought of getting students writing their answers in prose on a spreadsheet, but why not?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of like the mindset, because you have this idea that Sheets is just for formula, and it's just for maths type stuff. And then you say it's sort of flipping it on its head. I love that idea, though. I love that idea. I'm going to steal that too. Find out who I need to quote for that idea.
You can do. Anything from you, Danielle? You're on mute.
I am. I'm going to use that Sheets idea. That's really good, Darren. And just I completely agree with what Ciara was saying there about being able to put videos into Jamboard. I'm trying to now look at, developing mastery learning techniques and having asynchronous mastery learning pathways. And I think that would be really useful to have it within there, because we do the students do gravitate to Jamboard, and I do love slides, and I put a lot of the resources into slides. But as I said, if they were asked to work together on anything and build all their ideas together, they go to Jamboard. They just feel so comfortable in that space. So really, that's what I think would be great. If I could have this sort of mastery journey through and have my videos in the Jamboard and have that sort of thinking space flexible in and around the background to it, that would be fab for me.
And if you can embed a form or a quiz into it, even better.
Perfect, indeed. Yes. Yeah.
I'm just going to pull up something here, Danielle, of the embedding of the video. This was something that I put together because I found that the digital jotter is great in that I get all the students in one place at one time, which is absolutely super. Now, let me just think what it is I need to search. One note to myself, I wish I had a better system for naming all my slides.
Sorry to cut across you. Yeah, that's on my wish list. Somebody has my paper drive.
Yeah, here it is.
As long as nobody ever looks in my archive folder. My archive folder is the spare room where every file just gets dumped if I don't know what to do with it.
So this is a slightly different use of Google Slides, where it's using the digital jotter, as you were saying, Darren, about the collating everything together in sheets from a teacher's point of view, in terms of making the workload more streamlined, that instead of having to go through, not that it's hugely difficult to go into your classroom and click the next and have a look at a whole bunch of individual slides, but the marking burden is real, and anything that we can do to streamline it is good. But this is looking at in a completely different way. This is looking at as a digital workbook, because this is some of the geography technology, GIS. So it may be Google Earth or maybe other GIS technologies that I'll get the students to go and look at. But what they need is their own individual version here. So I'm able to guide them all through. So this is never in present mode. It's allowing them really to go through. And what I'm doing whenever I'm getting them to do the work, I'm trying to manage the cognitive load by breaking everything down into bite-sized chunks. I'm even doing this out in Google Docs. First of all, navigating through was difficult because they were just a little bit more all over the place. Whereas you can say to them, right, everybody go into Google to slide number 5 there for me, please. But then they're able to work on at this home. Because up in the corner, what I have here is shamelessly ripped off VAR, controversial as it is. It's controversial here because it stands for Video Assistant Resource. So what I do is just record a little video walkthrough for them that gives them a few tips as to how they're going to go about completing this. And all I need to do is to timestamp this. Oh, and of course, it's going to throw up an advert in here first of all, but it timestamps it so it takes them through to the particular part of the video that's relevant. What are we going to get here? It's going to be Speechify again, isn't it? Something like that. Is my writing really that bad that Google thinks I need this all the time? So anyway, I'll let that load there in the background, but it's up there, and again, it's just a text box with a hyperlink in it, and there is the link through to the video. But it also keeps it nice and neat. I'm having the real estate of the slide taken up by a distracting video. Here we go. We can skip the ad. And this comes in timestamped at 1:47. And there's that particular part. Look, there's the slide. And there's the advice that they need and the tips that they need to go into the map, and it shows them how to do it. Which means then that this can become a task that's done partly in class, where I'm there to give them feedback in the moment or help and instructions. But if they don't get it done, or if they need a little bit more time, or if they're off, everything is there for them if they need to finish it outside. So again, it's just different ways of thinking about putting the videos in. And I must say, this may be a slightly more controversial thing. Yes, more functionality is good, right? But what I like about certain apps, we get an app that does one thing, but it does it really, really well. There's no distraction. There's nothing else gets in the way. There is such a thing, I think, such functionality sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, okay, put video in Google Jamboard, please. But the functionality here is the kind of thing that doesn't necessarily get in the way too much. You're focusing much more on the learning what's going on.
Superb. What a great idea. I love that VAR idea. Okay, we're going to wrap up shortly because we're just over the hour. But so I'm going to come to each one of you for a final thought. So let's start with Danielle. A final thought or a tip or something to take away about checking understanding using digital tools.
Yeah, so for me, it's all about in the moment, checking it live, checking for equal engagement, and making sure that those misconceptions are captured and caught and managed there and then before they really set in. And these tools that allow for the collaborative use will enable us in the classroom to do that, even though we can't do over-the-shoulder work.
Brilliant. Ciara?
For me, it would be to take the stigma out of making mistakes, evaluating, monitoring their own work with you, showing them how best to do that, letting them learn the actual process of how to edit, re-edit, and monitor their own work without the stigmatism or the panic or the fear from physical work as opposed to digital.
Yeah, great point. And Alistair?
One of the things I'll say to my students a lot of the time is that if you're not thinking, you're probably not learning. I shouldn't be the one doing most of the work in the classroom. My students should be working as much as I'm working, should be thinking as much as I'm thinking. And these digital tools that allow them to work in the moment and for me to check their understanding in the real time really helps them to engage in that thinking process.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, guys, for giving up your evening to take us through all these fantastic ideas. And I'm sure you're going to get lots and lots of questions through social media and things like that. And maybe even people requesting templates and all sorts. But it really has been superb. So thanks to everyone who's joined us this evening. Enjoy your bloodletting or your bloodletting, whichever you prefer. Do give us a follow on Twitter as well. Each of us here have got our own handles, but also follow us at GEG_UK and stay up to date with all of the future events and information that we are looking to share with you guys and help our community to grow. So thanks very much, everyone. Take care.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Right.